Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm bringing you a review of S.L. Huang's Burning Roses. I apologise for my pronunciation throughout this video. I apologise. This is a novella that I recently totally impulse purchased. I am aware this video is going up much later than when I'm filming this. It's December right now. I recently impulse purchased this, but by the time you're watching it, it will have been on my shelf for quite some time. But because I'm trying to review every single book on my shelf, and also because I genuinely really enjoyed this, I really wanted to give you just a quick little video review about why you should read this. As I say, bought this book myself, got it from Portal Books. We'll link them below. Great indie bookshop. Also, should go without saying, I'm not going to spoil a novella for you. Would be a bit of a dick move. Burning Roses is a fantasy novella that came out from Tor in October of 2020. I believe it was the 1st of October. I am the first one to admit that Tor novellas, if you buy them physically, they are ludicrously expensive. This was the ultimate frivolous purchase, but I am going to treasure it because I really loved it. But I had no idea what to expect, so it may have been a little bit of a shot in the dark. Maybe go for the ebook or the audiobook. S.L. Huang has one of the most interesting author bios I have ever come across. She has a degree from MIT, written a whole assortment of things that I now need to go and read, including Zero Sum Game, which I think was the one that I'd heard of, but she's also a stunt performer and firearms expert. I have to confess, sometimes when I'm going and digging for author information, I find things that I would rather not know about authors that kind of makes me dislike them, but in this case, I think I just want to be her friend. It was a pretty happy surprise, and also a good example of, oh, now I understand why you've written the book that you've written. Burning Roses is a fairy tale blend or a folklore blend, something that I always enjoy. We follow Rosa, also known as Little Red Riding Hood, and Huang, who is an archer, both people whose pasts cast a long shadow. That's hard to say in my accent. Whose pasts cast a long shadow. When sunbirds begin ravaging the countryside, these two monster killers set off to stop them. But these aren't two sprightly young monster killers, no, we have two women with the hindsight of middle age. So this story features a lot of them looking back on their pasts and how they ended up where they are and where they might go next. So we're looking at a blend of Western fairy tale with Chinese folklore. I did have to look it up because of that wonderful Eurocentric education I have, but Huang is a character from Chinese folklore, famous archer. Their story is really, really interesting. There's also been a Netflix film. I have no idea how good or bad it is, but it does involve that story, which I thought was an interesting timing coincidence. But we also have Red Riding Hood, and we have a number of other Eurocentric fairy tale characters blended in. I'm sure there are other Chinese folklore characters that I definitely missed, but as I say, Eurocentric education, I am a product of my upbringing. It is not great. I would love to learn more. And this book did prompt me to do a bit more research. We will come on to that. I want to start by saying that I absolutely love this. This is exactly what I want from a novella. I want enough plot and substance that I feel like I've consumed a whole story, but with enough threads left open that you can let your mind wander along the themes and come up with other ideas about what might happen after the fact. That being said, the number of novellas that I've consumed, well, I suppose it's all relative. I've read Murderbot, I've read most of The Wayward Children, Upright Women Wanted. I think that's everything. I'm looking now. To Be Taught If Fortunate. That's the other one I've read. Oh, also Prosper's Demon was one that I haven't then owned. So I've read a number of novellas, and I know enough to know this novella was better than that novella, but I can't tell you like, the perfect novella has these 7 things. It should always have this moment happening at page 47. But I think this one manages to strike that balance of short and sweet, but with substance quite well. And that's what I want from a novella. I want succinctness, but substance. It's pretty darn gay, LGBT+, however you want to word it. For a story that features 2 main characters who are not romantically involved, this book is heckin' gay. And that's how I like it. In my reading experience, I feel like we very rarely get to read books with older queer characters. So this book felt like a real treat. And I think that part of that is hindsight plays a really important role in these characters' journey throughout the book. We're not looking at people figuring themselves out. We're not looking at that kind of coming out story through the same lens as we would be if we were looking at these as young characters. But at the same time, they are still processing some things from their past and in some cases unlearning some prejudices. And I think that the way it plays off the 2 characters' different cultures is really interesting as well at certain points. As a queer story, it feels really fresh and really important and really solid, and I don't know how much of that's because most of the LGBT fiction I've read has been YA, so it focuses on stories that obviously teenagers are going to relate to, but this has something extra to it that's just really lovely to read. The fairy tale folklore elements are woven in so perfectly to the point where I think if I didn't know that they were fairy tales, I would assume they were original ideas. It never feels clunky. It never feels like something's just being brought in because, oh, we probably ought to get this fairy tale in there. Tick, we vaguely mentioned a bear, that kind of thing. I need to find the word for it. So in Rose's world, they have a word for people who transform into animals. It's something like Grundvergen. I don't know how you say it, but that's sort of how it's written down. So you have this idea that that is a thing, and that really ties the fairy tales together. I thought it was a really interesting exploration of prejudice. So we have this character Rosa who in another book might be, well, she can't be problematic because she's queer. She just can't be. We can't write nuance into this. We can't accept the prejudices within our own community. But instead, they really accept that Rosa has stuff that she needs to work through as well. It's just really powerful to have a character who, despite having gone through prejudice themselves, still has to unlearn things. I just think it's a really smart way of reflecting how these things actually work. Forgiveness is a huge theme in this book, and it's handled superbly. There's a lot of talk about sacrifice and penitence and that kind of thing, and I'm amazed how much information about that and how much is conveyed through a really short book. You know, I've read epic fantasy that took thousands of pages and 4 books to convey the same thing as this book says in like 160 pages. Now there's a time and a place for both the 1,000-page approach and the shorter approach, but there's just something about a good idea conveyed well that really scratches an itch. I think the only reason I didn't give this novella 5 stars was I wasn't entirely sold on the ending, but having said that, after reading this book I went, okay, I clearly have no knowledge of the Chinese folklore side of this, I should go and look into that a little bit. And I think, knowing what I know now about that story, I would probably appreciate that ending a little bit more and understand it more. I do have plans to reread this book in 2021. Like, it's not going to take too much time. It's a teeny weeny one, so I'm hoping that this will get bumped up to a 5 on a reread. My recommendations for what you might like to read if you've already read Burning Roses, or when you have read it, because I definitely think you should. Becky Chambers, for that found family queer. It's so good. I recommend Becky Chambers all the time, but it does also have a novella that's really good. I would recommend Upright Women Wanted, which is the other novella that I frivolously bought in the same order, but it is very, very good. And lastly, I would recommend The Four Profound Weaves, which is another novella that features older, in this case, older trans characters, and it is phenomenally beautiful, and I'm hoping that I can have a physical copy of that at some point because I desperately want one on my shelf. Should you read this? I absolutely think so. I think it's a wonderful story, and any book that prompts me to go, oh, I should really look into that, and then sends me down the research rabbit hole is a win for me. I genuinely think the only thing that would make me go, oh, maybe you don't want to pick this up is the price tag. It's just stupid to buy this full price, so wait and see if it's in your library. Maybe you can pick up the audiobook. Maybe you can borrow it from a friend. But for me, it was absolutely worth it. I'm so happy to own a copy, and I will definitely be lending out to any of my friends who want it when we're allowed to see each other and hand off gifts again. Comment below with any other novella recommendations you have, anything that you're excited for this year in 2021. I'm very excited for the Monk and the Robot series. I can't remember what it's called, but the Becky Chambers one, that's what I'm looking forward to. While you're down there commenting, you can also follow me on all of my social media. That's in the description below. You can subscribe because it makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Through a novella, that's what we're talking about.